Welcome to the newly branded Jane Healy Happy Hour, formerly Historical Happy Hour, the podcast that explores new and exciting novels of all genres. I'm your host, Jane Healy, and in today's episode, we welcome New York Times bestselling author Sadeqa Johnson to discuss her latest novel, Keeper of Lost Children. You've got an awesome poster there, which book was described as a moving exploration of hope, courage, and the ties that bind through generations. It released on February 10th. Welcome, Sadeqa, and congratulations. Happy launch.
Oh, thank you. And today is my 1 month book baby birthday.
Amazing. I know. Yes, and thank you for coming because I know like you must be crazed right now. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to do a quick bio and then like I
Okay.
said, I have a bunch of questions. Everyone chime in about where you're from and what you're reading. And then towards the end, if you have any questions for Sadeqa, put them in the chat or the Q&A. Sadeqa Johnson is the New York Times bestselling author of 6 novels, including The House of Eve, which was an instant New York Times bestseller and a Reese's Book Club selection, and her novel Yellow Wife. Her most recent novel, Keeper of Lost Children, came on sale February 2026. Originally from Philadelphia, Sadeqa Johnson currently resides near Richmond, Virginia. You can learn more about her at sadeqa.net or follow her on Insta at Sadeqa Says. Again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Oh, so happy to have you.
And it seems like you have such wonderful people in the audience. Hello, everyone. We see you. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Some of these women have been on like every single one. Marsha and Christine and Michelle. Thank you all for showing up all the time. It's awesome.
Yes.
So I obviously I've read historical fiction too, and I'm a fan of lesser known stories of women in history. And just when I thought I didn't, I'd heard a lot of, I've written World War II fiction. Just when you think all the stories, like this story blew me away. I had never heard about this. I never heard about the women who it's based on. So talk about the premise of this novel and how you decided to write it.
I always say that stories, they choose me, and I just have to be in the receptive mode to receive them. I was working on the House of Eve. I was, I think, on the 6th or 7th draft, and I was tucked away at a little writing retreat trying to get those edits done. You know how that is at the last minute. You have a short amount of time to get a lot of work done. And
Yeah.
so I took myself away, and I'm always writing and researching. And I think I popped into my Google search bar like orphans, unwanted children, which were themes in the House of Eve as well. And up popped a woman named Mabel Grammer. And Mabel Grammer is an American, or was an American journalist. She married a chief warrant officer in the United States Army, and she followed him over to Germany. They were stationed in Mannheim. He worked a lot. She felt very isolated. She didn't speak the language. She was a devout Catholic. She also was a little bit sad because she was unable to have children because of a childhood illness. But because she was a devout Catholic, she was often in church. And these nuns came up to her and they noticed how sad she was. And they invited her back to the orphanage. And when she got there, she discovered a gaggle of mixed race children in the orphanage. A little known consequence of World War II was that there was a lot of African American soldiers that went into Germany. They had relationships with German women. We know what happens when relationships happen. Babies are born, and these babies were a product of this union, and they were the ones who were left behind.
Just incredible. And so I want to I love talking about research. Let's start with Mabel Grammer's, how you discovered her. She was this adoption champion, civil rights worker, journalist. What she did in connecting these children and getting them adopted was extraordinary. So talk about the research into her. And then I have another question about the other overall research for this book.
What I learned about her was that once she discovered these children, she decided that something needed to be done. And so she started a one-woman adoption agency where she made it her mission to place these children. She's responsible for moving over 500 of these biracial children into American homes, both in the Army over in Germany, but also bringing them over to America. She and her husband adopted 12 of these children themselves, which is incredible. I have 3 kids. I cannot imagine 12 miles to be adopted 12 of these children. Because she was a journalist, she penned what she called the Brown Baby Plan. And she wrote these articles with a step by step guide on how to adopt these children by proxy. And she had them printed in American newspapers. It was phenomenal. Like, she didn't have the resources that we had, but she got so much done.
Amazing. Yeah, again, I just can't believe it. I had never heard of her. I never heard of the story. So talk about like your research process overall and like what sources you use that what were like invaluable. Was there anything that surprised you? Anything like that?
I was able to find some articles that Mabel Grammer wrote herself, which was very helpful. I followed those articles. I was able to get her voice and get a sense of who she was through those articles. I took a trip to Germany. My husband and I went over for about 10 days, and we went to Frankfurt. We went to Mannheim, which is where the US Army base used to be, in which the story takes place. It was the Benjamin Franklin Village. And so we walked the village. The base had been given back to the Germans at this point, but there were still some structures that were there that had been there during the time of my story. I walked through the cemeteries because for the German aspect of the story, I wanted to make sure that I got the names and the flavor correct. Spent a lot of time at the Library of Virginia. I'm so fortunate that I don't live far from there, and it is such a resource for all of my historical fiction. I could always check out books and get periodicals and things of that nature.
Excellent. So this story, so you have one character, Ethel, who is based directly on Mabel Grammer's, but it's told from three different perspectives, which I was like, so that's so challenging and impressive.
Oh, it was so challenging. So challenging.
I was thinking like how. So let's talk about the two other characters' perspectives. So there's Ozzie Phillips, who joins the newly desegregated army in 1948 and is stationed in Germany and falls for a German woman. And then there's also Sophia Clark. Her storyline takes place in 65. She's a Black teen growing up on a Maryland farm with pretty terrible parents.
Wow.
Yeah. So talk about these two characters and why you decided to weave in their stories as part of the overall.
I knew that Ozzie's story was important because when I think about the thousands of World War II books that have been written, documentary films that you see, the Black soldier is largely left out of the narrative. And I knew that it was important for him to have a voice because in these larger places, he did not have a voice. And so it was important for me to write his story. I saw my great uncle, who's 94 years old, at my family reunion, and he was in the Air Force around the time that Ozzie is in the Army. And so I started picking his brain about what it was like for the American soldiers, Black Americans going over to Europe during the Double V campaign, fighting for freedom for the Europeans when they didn't have freedom at home because of Jim Crow. And so I thought it was important to weave all of this into his character. And Ozzie was the character that sort of came into my office. He sat down next to me and he said, Sadeqa, let me tell you my story. It's going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's going to be ugly, but it's going to be true. And I thought it was going to be difficult for me to write a male character. I was very afraid. But once I got into it, we had a connection. It almost felt like he was a family member and I was telling his story. And then for Sophia, I have this propensity of writing these young girls that's sort of on the coming age moment, but they have this idea that they want their lives to be better, but there are all these things holding them back. You see it in Yellow Wife with Phoebe. You see it in The House of Eve with Ruby. And now in Keeper of Lost Children, Sophia is this girl who, like you said, is living on this farm. She has terrible parents. She really hates her life, but she's given this opportunity to go to a boarding school. And this changes her life in a lot of ways. But when she gets there, she realizes that she's one of the first African Americans and that she's not only there for an education, but she's there to integrate the school, which comes with a host of issues and problems for her and her friends. So, yeah, these two characters I thought were very important to add to the story.
So interesting. So this is like a two-part question regarding doing, three narrative threads. What is your writing process like? Are you a plotter or a pantser? I ask every author that comes on, do you plot it out? Do you write by the seat of your pants? Is it somewhere in between? What's your process?
So I'm definitely a planner. I start a novel with an idea And then I talk it through with my agent, and she says, like, go write a synopsis. And so I write a synopsis that has a very loose beginning, middle, and end. And then I sit down to write it. I break the story up in whatever parts. If it's going to be 3 parts, this book happens to be 4. I tried to make it 3, but it was hard. And so it became 4 parts. So I break it up and I have an idea of, I know my character is going to start here. These are a couple of things that are going to happen. But by the end of part 1, we need to be right here. And that's my flow for this novel because I was juggling the 3 point of views. What I did was I spent a week or 2 with each character and only that character so that I only had their voice in my head. And so I would write Sophia for maybe 5 or 6 chapters. Same thing for Ozzy, and then the same thing for Ethel. And then I would literally print the pages and sit down on my office floor and pick the chapters up to see where the connections were and how I could bind it together like a story.
Okay, that was the second part of my question. I'm like, how'd you do it? How'd you weave it all together like that? 'Cause
Yeah.
that is not easy. And I'd read a couple of interviews that you did where you talked about that. So well done. So when this is another one about writing, when writing historical fiction, how do you balance the historical facts of the time and the fiction elements of the story? Are there any strict rules you have and let you adhere to, or how do you balance that?
I don't have any strict rules. I think I'm doing all the research, like the majority of the research I'm doing up front, and the research informs my plot point. So I do try to stay as close to history as possible, particularly if I'm basing it on someone true, like a Mabel Graham. I try to stay as close as possible. But when I sit down to write the story, it's like the research is, I've done all of that. It's inside of my body. It takes a back seat so that I can make space for the characters to come through me so they could guide me and let me know what they're supposed to do next. So I don't know, it's a mergy thing that happens. I don't really have control over it. I just let it happen and let it flow.
And with this one, has it gotten so this is your 6th novel? I always ask this.
6th novel,
Has it
yeah.
gotten easier? Like, I just
No,
wow.
no, it doesn't get easier. It's like raising children. It does not get easier. Everyone you add to your bunch comes with a whole host of personalities and challenges and all the things. So no, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, this one definitely felt like my hardest book. My agent kept saying, Sadeqa, you're writing your most ambitious book. And in the beginning, I was like, why does she keep saying that? Like, I'm just writing a novel. And then halfway through, I was like, okay, I get it. This is really hard. So it doesn't, for me, for this book, it didn't get easier.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't
book number 7, I hope. Maybe lucky 7 will just
know.
drip off my finger. Yes.
Regarding that, like your kind of trajectory, I want to read this. I didn't realize you came from a self-publishing background originally. So you've had this amazing trajectory from like self-published author to Reese Witherspoon pick, a New York Times bestseller, and you're a public speaker. I was checking out your website, and you give this talk entitled Manifesto: How Belief Turns Pages into Bestsellers. And I loved some of the points that you make in that talk. You gave a summary of the talk. So can you share about your publishing journey and kind of the lessons you share in that talk? Because I thought that was amazing.
My publishing journey started off way, way long ago. I started off working in publishing. I was a publicist at Scholastic Books. And it was there that I was surrounded by books. I had always loved writing. I was a theater major and communications major in college. And so I was writing and poetry and all of that. And so when I had my first job, it came together where it was like, okay, I'm going to write this novel. I love to read. I think I can do this. So I worked on my novel for years, my first novel for years. I made contacts in the business. I knew agents, I knew publishers, I knew editors. I was in town cars with some of the New York Times bestsellers of the day, Catherine Coulter, Nevada Barr, Bishop T.D. Jakes. And I was like picking their brain. What is this? What's your writing schedule like? How does this feel? How does that feel? Because I was gathering information so that when it was my turn, I was ready to be an author. Well, lo and behold, I quit my job. I was having my first son. I told my husband, I said, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to take care of our son and I'm going to be a New York Times bestselling author. And he's like, you're going to quit your job? That's all he heard. I like, yes, just trust me. It's going to work out. But it wasn't a straight and narrow path. I had an agent. She took the novel out to market. When I had this plan, I just had the one kid. By the time she took my book out, Love in a Carry-On Bag, she had 10 rejections from top tier editors. The 11th editor said, I'm interested in the book. Let me think about it over the weekend. At this point, I had 3 little children. So you can see how much time went by. And she
Yeah.
came back to me on that Monday and she said, I'm so sorry. I can't buy her book. And my agent said, why don't we wait 6 months and see what we can do? But I had already been waiting for years. And so my husband convinced me, like, we should just start our own publishing company, a small one. You have all this background in publishing. Let's put it to use and get this book out. And so we did. And we literally took Love in a Carry-On Bag up and down the East Coast. We were selling them out the back of our trunk. Had these 3 kids tagging along. I dressed them in t-shirts that said, buy my mommy's book. And I was literally hand selling my book to anyone who would give me the time of day. And that was really my foundation. I think the biggest lesson there is that you can't give up on your dreams because the miracle is just right around the corner. Because once I got through all of that, my editor then became my agent and she was able to take my next book to the big publishing houses and I got 3 offers. So I went from no offers on my first book to 3 offers. I was able to sit and choose who I wanted to work with on my second and my third book. And so there was just a lot of me just staying the course and not giving up. I'm big on vision boards. At the beginning of the year, I plot out what I'm trying to manifest and bring into my life. I have a word that sort of shapes what I'm trying to do, and I stayed the course.
It's so inspiring, and I love talking about authors' paths because it's never like a straight line. It's always long and winding, and I love that you started. I guess I missed that you not only self-published, you started your own publishing company, which is even more amazing. So, yeah, I just love that. You teach writing workshops, and you have one coming up in France, which I was like, oh God, that sounds amazing. In a couple of months, I'm so jealous.
Yeah. Next month, actually. I'm so not ready, but I'm excited.
Great. What is some of the best writing advice you give to aspiring authors who want to write
Well,
fiction?
the first thing I say is keep your butt in the seat. Writing is writing, right? So we spend a lot of time in our brain saying how we don't have enough time to write. We have all these things to do. I know I am guilty right now. I have not been able to find the time to write. But I tell my students, I say, just start with 20 minutes. And I probably should be taking my own advice right now. Just start with 20 minutes a day, whether it's first thing in the morning or whether it's right before you go to bed. And you will see that just that showing up, making that appointment with yourself, the writing will start to flow. I see writing as an act of self-love, right? As writers, we have to write. For me, writing is like breathing. And so we have to write. And so showing up for yourself 20 minutes a day is always number one. Number two, I would say get into a writing community. You need people to hold you accountable for things. And there are lots of free writing communities, I'm sure, in your community. And then the last thing I would say is reward yourself. Give yourself a goal and say, I'm going to do the 20 minutes a day for 30 straight days. At the end of that 30 days, reward yourself with something. You've done a good job. My reward is usually a massage, but your reward could be a glass of wine and a piece of chocolate.
Excellent. Excellent advice. Your first novels, your first 3 were contemporary fiction, and then you pivoted to historical. Do you have a preference between the two?
Oh, that's funny. No one's asked me if I had a preference. People ask, are you going to go back to contemporary fiction? But no one has asked me if I had a preference. I don't think that I have a preference. I think that I write the story that comes to me. I had not I had not planned to write historical fiction. It was just one of those things that I was walking the Richmond Slave Trail. I was with some friends. I read this marker about this woman, Mary Lumpkin, who was an enslaved woman. And I just was, I don't know, I was turned off by the way the marker described her. On one marker, it said that Robert Lumpkin, the man who she was married to, but was also her jailer and her owner, he was a bully. He was the devil. This was the devil's half acre. He was notorious for being the one that was ultimately the hardest punisher in the land for enslaved people. But then it said with Mary and their 5 children that they wanted for nothing. And I just remember thinking something is left out of this story because I knew a woman like her didn't have agency over her life. And I really wanted to know what that meant to her. And that was the beginning of the ancestors pushing me and pressing me towards writing this story because it was a book that I wanted to read, but I didn't think I was qualified to actually write it. I thought to write historical fiction that you had to have a PhD in history or at least a master's degree in history. I didn't know how to do it. But I had a friend who she said to me, she said, Sadiqa, the thing that scares you most is what you're supposed to be doing next. And that just gave me permission to say the very least I can do is give this book a try. And I'm glad that I did because here we are.
Here you are. I know. This is an off-topic thing, but what did it feel like to get that call about being a Reese Witherspoon pick? That must have been amazing.
Oh, wow. It was so like crazy because I was like sitting on my front porch. It was like the end of summer. I was like in a ratty t-shirt, hair just crazy all over my head, just whatever I was doing, not thinking about that. And my agent is like, "Hey, can you jump on a Zoom call really fast?" And they're like all these people on the Zoom call. And they gave me the news and it was like, "Oh my gosh," because when I go back to what I wanted from the beginning, when I went out and I self-published that first book, the reason why I didn't stay self-published and I wanted to go back to the publishing house, because my goal, my dream was always to be a New York Times bestseller. So with every book, that was always my goal. And once I got that call, I thought, I have a real chance at it now. I really have a chance at it.
Absolutely. Great. I have a couple more questions for you. Everyone, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A. Are you ready to share what you're working on next?
I'm not really working right now on anything. I'm mostly on tour. I've been on a 16 plus city tour for the last month. So I've been on planes and at events talking to people about the keeper of lost children. I'm thinking about a story. I have a little inkling of a place that I think I want to write about, which is a little different than normal. Usually it's the woman who comes to me and says, "This is a story I'm going to write," but this time it's a place. So I have to fool around with it a little bit more and just see where this idea takes me.
See what bubbles up from that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is another question I always ask. Was the title always Keeper of Lost Children?
The title was actually Beautiful Children to start. And when it got to my UK publisher, she thought that it was a little bit soft. And so we started playing around with words. We usually have this big Google Doc that everybody's contributing to, and we moved words around and we came to Keeper of Lost Children.
Fun. And then do you have a say in the cover? Because this is a beautiful cover.
Thank you. Yes, we worked very hard on it. I think at least 2 or 3 months it took us to get the cover. I love it. But yes, I had a lot of feedback on the cover. Yes, a lot of feedback.
And yeah, just those little braids. Like it just catch you.
Yes, exactly. And the little hunch in her, the hunch in her back and the trench coat and all of that. I love it.
So precious. Oh, Sandra asks, you have a very pretty name. Does it have any meaning?
Friend.
Fred. Oh, lovely.
Friend. Yeah.
Let me see. Any other questions in the chat? I don't see. Yeah, people are being shy tonight. And what are you reading right now? You probably don't have any time to read.
Oh no, I'm reading right now by Tayari Jones.
Oh, yeah.
She's the Oprah pick for this month. So I'm reading that book right now, which is really good. And I'm listening to a book called Cursed Daughters. And I don't want to butcher the author's name because I don't know how to pronounce it, but Cursed Daughters is what I'm always listening to a book and reading a book.
Yeah, same here. It helps me get through more books. I'm reading It Girl by Alison Pataki, which just came out today. So
Oh yeah, I
I
haven't heard of that.
the cover, like your shirt, like same shade of pink. I love pink. So
Yeah.
let me see. Did I miss anything? No, I think that's it. And I know you have another call, so I'll give you a little time in between. Again, congratulations. This is a beautiful story. I wish you so much success with it. It's such an important story too, like the history. So and congrats on your tour. I should mention you have you have a great section on your website for book clubs.
Yeah.
Information there. And you have a lot of events coming up. If people are looking for where you might be at in the country, and also in France.
Yes. Yes. And I will say this. If there are any writers in the room, we have 2 slots left for my writing retreat in Arcachon, France. You can go to my website. It will be under events. You do have to apply, but we do have 2 slots left. And it's from April 5th to the 11th. So you still have time.
Amazing. Again, congratulations. Keeper of Lost Children is out now from Simon and Schuster. My latest novel, The Spy Thriller Woman in Arlington Hall, is out from Lake Union. Don't forget to follow Happy Hour wherever you listen to podcasts or subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you again, Sadeqa. Take care. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.